Mm, mm.
Welcome, Nikhil.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
you hear me?
Yes, yes, Nikhil.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you. Good to
yeah,
be here. Has Aruna managed to join? Because she was also trying, I think.
yeah. We don't have her number. Could you just call her, please?
Yes,
Connie?
yes, I called her. She
Oh,
joined.
all
Continue
right, all right.
from
Thank
your
you.
side. Yeah.
Thank you, Nikhil.
Hello.
Hi, Nikhil.
Hi. So I can me.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
But Aruna has not managed to join yet, is it?
Yeah, she's
Hello.
not here yet.
I'm sending the number on the chat. Someone could call her. She was trying to join. I also couldn't join because I couldn't join as a panelist. I think that must be the trouble. She's somewhere else. So I'll just send the number, her number on the chat.
She's in this thing.
Sorry.
We can check if she's in the attendees by mistake.
Yeah, she must be there.
So she's not. Just
Yeah,
check
her
just
name
now.
is not. Yeah, her name is not there.
Okay. If you give me 2 minutes, unfortunately, I'm on my phone. I'll just call and I'll come back. I'll just
Sure.
call.
So good evening to our attendees. At this moment, we have a slight delay because we are waiting for the key person, Ma'am Aruna Roy, to log into the Zoom.
There's someone as signed up as MJ and has a hand raised up. So you would like to, just in case it's Aruna herself.
Okay. We can unmute, I think.
The person identifying as MJ. You have your hand raised.
A user by the name MJ, you have your hand raised. Could you unmute yourself and speak? So Nikhil, any idea if Ma'am Aruna has
Yeah,
already joined?
I just to her, she said something is it's got messy. She's asked for the link again on her email. I've sent it to her.
Okay.
She's been trying it 10 minutes. So she'll come on, I think, soon. Just
Yeah.
watch for her though in both places as a panelist and not. Does she have a panelist link? Is there a separate one? I'm sorry about this.
Nikhil, would
I've
she
given
say-
a number. I've sent a number for 9414007305. If someone could just call her directly, who's running it.
Nikhil, does she normally sign up as Aruna Roy herself?
Yeah.
As in,
Yeah.
then that's fine.
Yeah.
Then Jeevan will spot her and make her panelist.
Yeah. I've sent a number on the chat.
She's there. I'm putting her into practice.
Okay, so Ma'am Aruna, good evening. Ma'am Aruna, can you unmute yourself, please?
Has Dorothy joined?
Yeah, I think we are also waiting for Dorothy. Ma'am Aruna, can you please unmute yourself? Just want to check systems if they are working.
I've unmuted myself. Can you just,
Yeah, we can hear you, ma'am. We can hear you.
and
Yeah.
I've also started the video. Can you see me as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We just wanted
Right.
to check the systems. Yeah.
Of course, of course.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Not at all. I'm sorry I joined a bit late.
So, Steve, we are ready to go.
Yes, Sunil, go ahead.
So,
Welcome,
once
Aruna.
again, good evening to everybody gathered here, and a warm welcome on behalf of Pratek and Forum of Religious for Justice and Peace to our webinar on The Personal is Political, where we delve into key themes and insights of this compelling book with the author, the very well-known Aruna Roy. This webinar experience hopes to offer an unique opportunity to explore how personal experiences, collective struggles, and political structures intersect in the pursuit of social justice and transformation. I am Brother Sunil Brito, and I'm joining from Shillong, Meghalaya. And together we will create space for deep reflection, meaningful discussion, shared learning, drawing inspiration from Aruna Roy's profound journey. We look forward to your active participation in what promises to be an enlightening and engaging process. I would now like to introduce Aruna Roy, the author of the book, The Personal is Political. Aruna Roy is a prominent Indian activist and social reformer, best known for her pioneering role in RTI, Right to Information Movement. A former civil servant, she left the Indian Administrative Service to work with marginalized communities, co-founding MKSS, Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, in 1990. Her relentless advocacy for transparency and accountability in governance led to the enactment of the RTI Act in 2005, empowering millions of citizens in our country to demand their rights. Aruna's work extends to issues of social justice, land rights, and gender equity. She's a recipient of numerous awards, including the prestigious Ramon Magsaysay Award, recognizing her unwavering commitment to the empowerment of the poor and the fight against corruption. With genuine admiration, I now invite Ma'am Aruna Roy to share with us her journey and reflections as the author of the book.
Thank you very much, Brother Sunil. And I would like to begin by requesting Nikhil, who has been with me at all the launches, to introduce why it's important for us to meet all of you and talk and what has happened in these launches. So with your permission, may I ask Nikhil to just say a few words before I begin?
Yes,
If you like, I know this changes the order a bit, But if you like, I'll just do my little bit. I'll speak for 5-6 minutes before Aruna. And then I won't speak when my turn comes, if that's okay.
Okay, so what I'm proposing is, let's, for the sake of the audience, let them hear a little bit about you. That will prepare them for what you're going to say. So can I introduce you then? Yeah, please,
Please.
if you don't mind, Ma'am Aruna.
No,
Yeah. Yes. Okay, it's good to do it a little bit impromptu as well. So I take this opportunity to introduce Nikhil as well. Nikhil Day. Nikhil Day is a founding member of MKKS, Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, alongside Aruna Roy and Shankar Singh. Since 1990, he has worked full-time with MKKS, playing a key role in the organization's decision-making collective. Nikhil has been deeply involved in grassroots struggles for justice, including land rights and the payment of minimum wages for the poor. He is also a founding member of Jan Sarokar, a network of Indian social movements advocating for social justice. So, with heartfelt anticipation, I now invite Sir Nikhil Day, a very close and constant companion to Ma'am Aruna Roy, to share his reflections with us.
Thank you so much to all of you. And this is a really interesting group for us to meet with, because I think amongst the many book launches so far, and which is why Aruna wanted someone else to speak rather than herself to begin with, it's a book that at every launch, this is the first online discussion in a sense. It has been hugely and enthusiastically welcomed, and a lot of discussion has taken place from amongst a lot of people who have been fellow travelers with Aruna over many decades. The importance today, I think, of this particular book is that everyone here is in some way engaged with society of wanting to change things and have a better world. Everyone, many people here are people of faith, and faith in the sense of not just keeping faith, but having a duty to do something for humanity. And that, I think, is something that reverberates through Aruna's book a lot. In that sense, it is, as they say, very Catholic, and it has a lot of continual, it does not use jargon, but the importance today perhaps is that it deals with people who want to deal with engagement and with society. Many questions that occur to all of us, nothing is black and white. We all have complex pressures on us. We all lead lives where many things are important at the same time, and all of them are legitimate. And in these 50 years, she, of course, encompasses a large part of India's independent history in her work of 50 years, and before that, in her life itself. Actually, her life is coterminous with independent India. And both the dreams and the challenges, but how the little things matter a lot, are what has made the book. So what made it very interesting in each one of these, and that's why I think Aruna wanted to talk about it. Somewhere she was in a conversation one-on-one. Somewhere she was in a panel. Somewhere that panel spoke about the book and of contemporary times. People spoke about their own experiences in the past, as well as relating it to the book. And the book intends to foster conversations, and this is one such kind of conversation. And I think that's really very, very good. I'm going to read, which I haven't done before actually, and then I will end with, I normally end with in all these. I have been in each one of the book launches, actually, everyone has used that same pun on what we did, the last word, because Shankar and I, who have been Aruna's co-travelers in the MKSS, wrote the last word a couple of pages. I'm going to read a bit from that. I'm going to first read one bit which is interesting, I think, which Sainath wrote. A whole lot of people wrote that itself is an interesting set of short writings where Jean Reyes and Amartya Sen wrote about the book, Jayati Ghosh wrote about the book, Harshmanda wrote about the book, Saida Hamid wrote about the book, Suraj Yengde wrote about the book, T.M. Krishna wrote, Eve Ensler, who calls her the American feminist, famous feminist, P. Sainath, Kavita Srivastava, Vani Raja. But I am going to read a paragraph from Sainath, and then one, if we have time and you think it's okay, I'd like to read a paragraph from our last word. So Sainath says you need to read this book. It works at the intersection of so many processes: gender, labor, feminism, activism, social movements, politics, policy making, culture, communal violence, and more. You'd think that's too big a stretch in one book, but the author manages it gracefully and analytically. This is a book that could probably only have been written by Aruna Roy. The simplicity and honesty of its expression actually walks us through what are truly complex questions. It's more than a fine memoir. It captures an era in our history. So it is that era, this history, that we have an opportunity to delve into, but delve into in a way that I'm sure future generations will also apply the very same questions, because it deals with human questions. If I have time, a couple of 3-4 minutes, then I'd like to read a couple of paragraphs from our last word. Do I have time, or should I conclude immediately? Anyway, I'm going to just read.
Yes, sir. So please.
Shankar and I wrote this, that for the last 4 decades, we have been part of almost everything in Aruna's life, and she in ours. As the enormous task of writing such a book reaches its conclusion, we felt what in today's language is called our FOMO, fear of missing out moment. How could we not have our voice in it? This, therefore, is an afterword that has been included on our demand and an entitlement for us to be in the book, quite inadvertently, have the last word. Now, that was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but actually, we are there in the book. And right through the book, when I read it, I've felt it, I've known those bits in the book. And whether one is mentioned or not, all of us are there because it's a part of our history. And I'd like to read that the last bit of what we say in the book, that we talk about where there are many things in Aruna's life. This book is not about how the RTI came or NREJ came or Right to Food came or the many very great things that have come in which Aruna has been involved. We've said that's a story that will be told and analyzed repeatedly and in many ways. But it is the story of what shaped Aruna, told in her own words, that will help us appreciate the time she has lived in and the positive effect we can have on people and society. We can testify as close witnesses that Aruna has written a book of immense value to those who want to understand complex socio-political processes, the significance of the social in a social movement, and a continually challenged social democracy, and how the personal is inextricably and wondrously woven into those vast tapestries of social change. We are both living testimonies to Aruna's positive influence on those she then worked with. This book too has the potential to be an inspiration for those who have not met Aruna Roy, but who are on a similar search for justice, equality, free expression, dignity, true fraternity amongst large numbers of people. We feel quite strongly that this is a book that will spread hope far beyond its own context and times. And that's why I just want to end by saying, every time we have ended by saying that the book is an opportunity to bring people together who want to act. The book, Shankar has often said, कि पूरा आंदोलन तो हिंदी में हुआ, पूरी बात हिंदी में हुई, लेकिन किताब अंग्रेजी में लिखी. And in other words, he said many things. This is a book that Aruna has done, and then it's just written, those thoughts that were in her mind. So it's a call to all of you also after this to find ways for us to work together and carry on these conversations, but also carry on these actions, which lead to the greater common good. Thank you.
So for delivering a honest and a moving introduction to Aruna's journey. And as you said, it's the journey that we all share as people who are working for the good of others. And also it was your journey of true collaboration that you shared with Aruna ma'am. So thank you very much, sir. Ma'am Aruna, would you like to continue from where Sir Nikhil left?
Yes, indeed. And thank you so much for adjusting to our craziness, because we who work in this kind of world tend to become informal very much more quickly than others do. So I already feel I'm a member of your larger family. I feel a member of your larger collective, and I feel comfortable that I am talking to you. So thank you so much. This book is partly or largely about communication. All activists are communicators. We have to not only look at what we say and what we do, but we have to communicate to mobilize. It's extremely important that if you understand what you're doing, to be part of a struggle, to oppose authority, then you need to communicate at many levels. You need to communicate at a theoretical level, but before that, you have to communicate at a human level. They have to understand how this entire process of involvement with public life is going to improve their lives. And that you can only do through talking, to sitting with them, through living like them, to understanding them. And at a point when you empathize with everybody so much that you become them, and that division between you and them is completely or as far reduced as possible. The beginnings of this book have been very, very strange, because I really was very reluctant to write, because all of us have been victims of the press report or the other report that one has to write to get on with it. We've been not really trained in one sense to be organized enough to write a book. So in most cases, there's a great reluctance in people who are activists to sit and even record anything. And given this scenario, I was very, very reluctant. And I was also very, very worried about the personal and the political, but also the private. Because very often what is private should be kept private. There is no way in which what is private should become public information. So as an activist related to the RTI, I also know how sensitive it must be to keep privacy and private thoughts at their level. But personal and political are intertwined. For instance, there have been so many instances in the book, but for instance, if I talk about public morality in a public forum, I come back home, I can't do anything immoral at a level at which I question myself. So the same demand for public morality acts on me as a demand for my own morality at a personal level, and it's non-negotiable. So I always live with issues like, am I right? Which is always a question hanging in the air. And that's why when I was asked to put things into language, into a permanent black and white book, paper that would be held as a voice that would be held, and that I would be held accountable to it years later, I was wondering whether I had the capacity first to communicate, and secondly, whether I would be able to allow those areas of gray that come periodically to come, where you question what you've said, where you question what others are saying. You move from one position to another, but this would be possible. But this has gone into a communication far beyond my intended geography, my intended area of people I thought would communicate with me. It's gone beyond that. And for me, my life, for instance, the first thing that I asked myself, how was it? Did I read a book that you should be an activist? Did I see anything? Of course, I lived at the cusp of independence. Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated when I was a couple of years old. Independence was achieved when I was a year old. And all these things was not for me history. They were lived experiences, because my parents lived in Delhi. So these were lived experiences. And from this experience has emerged a politics. And that is the politics of nonviolence, the politics of humanity, the politics of tolerance. I have studied in Christian institutions. Both my parents graduated from Christian institutions. I know the story of Christ. I know the Bible. I know the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. And I know I'm acquainted with many of the scriptures, because my parents decided that when we were born that we should either know all religions or none. The choice was between all religions or none, as they were very widely read and people who had a great deal of understanding of humanity and of all religions, of all nationalities, of all kinds of expression. And so they held that this should not be narrowed down to a small prism. So I've grown up with all these. And for me today, the narrowing down of the vision of public acknowledgement of plurality is not acceptable, not because I've been tutored by some text, but because my life has known no other. You know, whether they are castes, whether you discriminate against caste, you discriminate against gender, discriminate against people who profess different religions, whether it is a confrontation between the atheist and the believer, whether faith is important or not important, but debates that took place at home. And it was this tremendously rich area of my growing up that gave me the ability to become what I am today. And somehow the personalist political draws on that. In my other books, in the other books that Nikhil and I have co-authored, we've been very correct. We've talked within the political frame. But in this book, there was a space to say that I have become the way I am because of the life I have led. And is it possible to lead such lives? Is it possible to give opportunities for people to lead these lives? And how important is the Constitution for allowing people to lead their lives the way I did when I was young, when the Constitution was yet to come when I was born, but the Constitution came and there were no debates about are you an Ambedkarite or you're a Gandhian. My father brought us up believing that Gandhi was important for independence and Ambedkar was very, very critical for the building of a new India. That without Ambedkar, it would not have been possible. He talked to us a lot about Christian compassion. And actually, for all of us growing up, Christ was the embodiment of compassion. Whether you believed he was Son of God or not was irrelevant in our household. That you believed that he was the ultimate in compassion, that when he was being crucified, he said, please God forgive them because they know not what to do. What they do is for me and for many, my siblings and many friends in my generation, one of the most extraordinary moments of compassion, retold as story or as myth or as belief or faith, which we have grown up with. So this book places many of these perceptions and all these things in front of people. It's partially also to say that it's not, activism is not something alien to most people in life. We all feel terrible when there's injustice. We feel awful when there's violence. We feel terrible when there's discrimination. And I think, I can't see any of you, but I assume that all of you who are listening to me have all felt it. The only difference between people who are activists and the non-activists is that the activists act on those feelings, look at structural possibilities and changes and work on them. In that, Gandhiji talked of three kinds of public action. He talked about charity, seva, he talked about development, nirman, and he talked about struggle, which was sangharsh. In my life, I've experienced all these three ways of working with people. The only thing is that when you get into an action of struggle for rights against the power of the state, then people start getting afraid of you because they think you'll upset the status quo. But it doesn't really upset the status quo because you're working within the legal frame, you're working within the constitutional frame. So somewhere in this, there is a problem with people who do not want to be either accountable, who do not want to let lose their impunity, and who want to continuously be taking the cream of the land, whether it is in misuse of power or in corruption or in money. So somewhere this accountability is terribly important, critically important, but it's also important in my family. I can't go back and say to my younger people in my family, I don't have any children, biological children, but I have many children. I can't say to them they don't have the right to question me they don't have to right to demand accountability from me, that they don't have the right to say I'm wrong. All these things are equally tenable and important. So that's a personal journey I traverse along with my political journey. And this book tries to tell people that we are not fiends. We are not Andolan Jivis. We are not, urban nakshals. We are not people who are there to skim the best out of society. We are there actually as activists because we can't not act. The problem with us perhaps is that we can't not act. This book is also for the young people who were born after 2000, who don't have any political history, who see Nehru or Gandhi or Ambedkar or Marx or communism or socialism or feminism with the kind of glasses that have been put on their noses through WhatsApp media. So you really don't know whether the fears that have come in are terrible. And this book is also to attempt to get rid of that fear. There was a very important book that I read by Christopher Isherwood, in which he said fear is the worst thing in the world. Because if you're afraid, then you lose rationality, you lose your sense of well-being, but also imposes on you the kind of inability to think and the inability to understand, the inability to relate. So in a sense, for me, this has also been a very important part of the book. Numbers of people have helped me with this book. It's not my book alone. It's a shared book in the sense that every chapter was read by young people. They monitored my language to see that I wasn't talking a language which was incomprehensible to the neo-literate, English literate. They tried to weed out difficult words from my language because it's also a question of language. My last comment is going to be that I live in a world with the poor people of Rajasthan where oral history and oral memory related to you in oral terms is the basis of all beginning of rights. Whether they tell you about how they've been deprived of minimum wages or how they've been deprived of many other things, how they are being accused of being bitches, everything is not written down, it's all stated. So the power of the spoken word and the history of literature in Rajasthan, which so depends on the power of the spoken word, has made me believe that the spoken word has the same power as complicated written theoretical language. And since I'm speaking to a religious group, whether it's the Bible or whether it is Kabir or whether it is the Sufi saints or whether it is the Bhakti poets, they all spoke in very simple language. And it's that language that has really reached people and changed them. Complicated theories take very long to reach them. And this book is meant for people who don't have the time or the energy to waste on understanding complicated theories. And one of the most happy things I have heard say about the book is that the language is easy, including a young Dalit boy from my village has read the book, who's the first neo-literate English speaker and reader in his family. And it makes me feel extremely happy. And one young friend said that it was one of the few books he has read. He's not a reader, and he never reads books, but he has read the book because it's in simple English. And for me, that was a compliment. And unlike my conditioning, which is from a literature background and of reading very complex, complicated texts, I did not want to read into this book or write into this book that kind of language which would put people off. And in common parlance, because I'm also a student of literature, we call this biblical English, which is simple, straightforward, and completely goes to the point which you want to communicate. And I was brought up on the New Testament and the Old Testament as texts for literature, so I know what they say. So I'll stop here because I've spoken for about 5 to 7 minutes, and I'll leave you now with your opinions, your ideas, what you have found in the text, what you want to say, because there's so much in the text that I dare not go on because otherwise I'll take the entire time. So I stop here. Thank you very much for discussing the book, for making me feel that I've made a valuable contribution to society in terms of starting many conversations. The last point being that Natasha Badwar, when she spoke in the launch in New Delhi, she said this book is going to be the beginning of many conversations. And she said, I will begin many conversations based on this book. For me, it's the biggest tribute to this book is that it will start all these conversations and will leave you with questions, as this book has left you with questions. because nowhere can we always give conclusive answers. But the most important thing is that we dialogue, we have conversations, and we start thinking. Thank you.
So, thank you, ma'am. A very moving presentation, sharing, I could call it. And you came across as a very humble and very genuine person as I was listening to you. What resonated with me is I was asking myself about my own origins as you were sharing in this search for justice, and also the question about where the future will be. Thank you for continually advocating pluralism. And I was moved, I must say, when I heard your words, Christ is the embodiment of compassion. Something moved inside me there. So let the conversations begin with this book. Let us start questioning. I think that is your desire. And definitely, I think many of us will be wanting to find this book and start reading it. So thank you very much. A real powerful sharing. And we are going to continue with this. As you said, this is only the start. You wanted this to be the start. So thank you very much, ma'am. For the group, I would like to share with you that if you have any questions for Aruna ma'am or for Nikhil sir, or for the panelists who are going to follow, please enter them in brief. Any questions you may have, as ma'am said, let's start questioning, let's start talking. So let the conversations begin, let the questions begin. And if you have any of them, please enter them in brief in the chat box. So the chat box is open all the time. Please enter your questions in brief. But if you can address it to a particular person, because you may think, because we have 4 more panelists, so you may want a particular panelist or Aruna ma'am or Nikhil sir to actually address it. So please name the person with the question too. And during the question answer session, which will follow a little later, we'll try to address as many questions as possible. So we're going to hear now from 4 different panelists, and each of these panelists have 7 minutes for their sharing. I'm happy to provide a reminder when the time is nearing its end and when it's time to summarize and to conclude. So the first of the 4 panelists to discuss this book is Brunel D'Souza. Brunel D'Souza is the chairperson of Center for Health and Mental Health at TIS, where her work bridges public health and social justice, focusing on marginalized communities. She has led projects with organizations such as UNAIDS and WHO, emphasizing health rights and equity. Beyond academia, Brunel has provided psychosocial care in crisis-affected regions, including Sri Lanka, Gujarat, Mumbai, Manipur. She also serves as a health expert on Independent Citizens Tribunal on Manipur, organized by PUCL. She co-founded Voices Against Sexual Abuse in the Church, VASAC, and is the co-convener of Jan Swasthya Abhiyan, Mumbai. I now very warmly welcome Ma'am Brunel D'Souza to share her deep insights with us. Welcome, ma'am.
So good evening to all of you, and a very warm good evening to Aruna and Nikhil, both whose lives have touched me very deeply. They will not know that, and Aruna, I had purchased your book in June of this June 2024. So I think I was among the earliest ones who purchased your book. And I also have given the copies to our students to do a book review. I teach a course on social action and basically it's about health activism. And so they will be doing a book review, and they look forward to also meeting with you. Online, if we can organize, because I think it has tremendous value for young people. The book. So I have, let me start, and I write this reflection from my multiple identities as a woman, as an Indian citizen, as a Christian, as an academic, as an activist, and as a teacher. So, and I've prepared a note that I stay on time, and I hopefully stay on time. So, because it's a very rich text, and I have, highlighted certain things that I would like to share and reflect upon. So Aruna Roy's memoir, The Personal is Political, explores the complex interplay between personal convictions and collective action, establishing it as an essential text for understanding the dynamics of activism in contemporary India. As an academic and practitioner deeply engaged in human rights work myself, I find Roy's work particularly resonant. It provides invaluable insights for a diverse range of persons, including those within faith-based communities and persons committed to social justice, on how to effectively navigate the multifaceted challenges of today's socio-political landscape. Aruna's journey from the Indian Administrative Service to grassroots activism in Tilonia, Rajasthan, is a testament to the transformative potential of aligning personal values with broader social justice goals. Her departure from the IAS, a symbol of state power and privilege to work with the rural poor, reflects a radical reimagining of one's role in society, a reimagining that challenges conventional notions of success and power. This transition mirrors the experiences of many activists, including those within faith-based communities who grapple with the tension between institutional allegiance and imperative of social justice. For faith-based activists, particularly those engaged in building capacities around human rights and social justice, Aruna's life offers a model of how one can live out the values of justice, compassion, and solidarity in ways that disrupt and challenge oppressive structures. One of the most compelling themes in the memoir is the intersection of the personal and the political, encapsulated in the feminist slogan, "The personal is political." This concept underscores the idea that our personal lives are deeply intertwined with broader social structures, and individual choices are invariably political. Aruna's emphasis on intersectionality is another critical aspect of her memoir that holds particular relevance for today's activists and all persons of goodwill. Her work with Dalit women and other marginalized groups underscores the necessity of addressing the multiple overlapping forms of oppression that shape people's lives. This intersectional approach is crucial for understanding the complexities of Indian society, where issues of gender, caste, class, and religion are often manipulated to reinforce existing hierarchies. Aruna's intersectional feminism offers a framework for understanding how various forms of oppression are interconnected and how they can be challenged through inclusive and holistic activism. The relevance of personal is political extends beyond individual narratives to encompass broader movements for social change. Aruna's experiences in Tilonia, where she struggled to gain the trust of rural women initially, are emblematic of the challenges faced by activists who seek to engage with marginalized communities. Her initial missteps, assuming that her status as a former IAS officer would facilitate dialogue, serve a cautionary tale for all of us, and highlight the need for humility, patience, and deep respect for the lived experience of those we seek to serve. Aruna's commitment to transparency and accountability, epitomized by her role in the Right to Information movement, offers a crucial lesson for all activists. The RTI Act, a product of grassroots struggle, has empowered ordinary citizens to hold the state accountable. an achievement that should inspire all of us, especially young activists who are often disillusioned by the perceived inaccessibility of political change. As I emphasize in the courses I teach on health activism and human rights, the RTI Act is not just a legal tool, but a symbol of the power of collective action. Aruna's assertion that the RTI has more feminist understanding of change underscores the need for non-violent democratic means of challenging power, a principle that remains essential in our fight for justice, especially in this authoritarian environment that we are grappling with. Aruna's reflections on the role of women in social movements offers critical lessons for activists working within patriarchal structures, whether in religious institutions or broader society. Her emphasis on the intersectionality of gender, class, and caste in shaping women's experiences of oppression is a crucial reminder that feminism must be inclusive and intersectional. This approach is particularly relevant in the Indian context, where women's struggles are often compounded by other forms of marginalization. For students and young activists, Roy's work provides a model of how to engage in feminist activism that is sensitive to the complexities of identity and power. In reflecting on the personal is political, it is impossible to ignore the socio-political context we find ourselves today. The increasing centralization of power, the erosion of democratic norms, and the rising tide of intolerance pose significant challenges to the pursuit of justice and equality in India. In this environment, Aruna's memoir serves as both a source of inspiration and a practical guide for activists. It challenges us to live our values, to bridge the gap between personal convictions and public action, and to persist in our efforts to create a more just and equitable society. The Personal is Political is not merely a memoir, but a critical text for understanding the dynamics of activism in contemporary India. For activists, including faith-based activists, young activists, and students, it offers a roadmap for navigating the complexities of identity, power, and politics in ways that are both principled and pragmatic. As we continue our work in human rights and social justice, Aruna's journey reminds us that the personal is indeed political and that our lives can be powerful instruments of change in the pursuit of a better world. And to conclude, to me, Aruna's memoir is a testament to the power of hope and resilience in the face of adversity. As democracy and civil liberties face unprecedented challenges in India, every person of goodwill, not just activists, can take heart from our unwavering belief in the possibility of change, even in the darkest of times. Her journey reminds us that activism is a long-term commitment, requiring both patience and persistence. For those working in an increasingly repressive environment, sustaining hope and nurturing resilience is critical to the fight for justice. Thank you, Aruna. Your book spoke to my heart, and I particularly enjoyed its simplicity and honesty. And you know, it's also, you know, the lack of surety about many issues that we are offering, grappling with. I'm extremely emotional at this point in time, so sorry for all of that. And not being able to have conclusive answers to everything, but that we dialogue, we network, we form relationships of solidarity, equality, and justice as we move ahead in our struggles for justice and rights, in our struggle to uphold constitutional morality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Man Brunel. A very, very rich presentation. We will be very happy if you can leave the text with us that you were using. A very rich presentation, and you brought out so well that from the I think it's from the 1960s, that feminist phrase, in the personal or in the private is the political. The connection between what happens to us internally should not be something which is disconnected from structures, especially systemic structures which are responsible for injustice. So thank you. Thank you for your for being very passionate about justice, feminism, and equity. And as I said, please, if you can leave that very rich text that you had with us, it will be
be happy.
a very good sort of an introduction or a sort of a guide with the book. Thank you, ma'am. So we move to the next panelist. The next panelist we have is Brother Jose Daniel. Brother Jose Daniel is a Montfort brother and a dedicated educationist, has tirelessly served the poorest communities across Hyderabad and beyond. He is the president of All United Christian Movement for Equal Rights, IAUCMER, the biggest ecumenical movement advocating for social justice for Dalit Christians in India. Brother Jose has worked to empower Dalits, women, children through alternative pedagogies. His efforts secured alternative housing for 20,000 slum dwellers in New Delhi's Ridge Valley slums. Thank you, brother, for that wonderful initiative. I now respectfully invite Brother Jose Daniel to share his thoughts and reflections, particularly on this book.
Good evening to you all. As I was entering my social action programs, I heard of Bangar Roy making the government to support the NGOs. I also had an opportunity to listen to Madam Aruna Roy, who addressed a large gathering of the NGOs in Hyderabad implementing watershed program. Her emphasis on grassroots level participation, transparency, accountability, social auditing, Grama Sabhas, group discussions and common decisions laid the foundation for our watershed implementation. May I join all of you to congratulate Madam Aruna Roy for gifting the right to information, MGRAGA, and right to food as a Magna Carta for governance in India. They created wonders for the teeming million, though there have been some eclipse in the recent past. Every page, the personal is political, vibrates her convictions and commitment to promote the emancipation and empowerment of the victims of exploitation and marginalization, awakening their own innate capabilities and constitutional rights. She showed extraordinary courage to follow her conscience, to dedicate her life in favor of the voiceless masses, the Dalits, tribals, women. In spite of her progressive family atmosphere, the parental support to venture into the unknown, it was challenging to counter the dehumanizing practices, traditions, and rituals. She had to encounter different languages, cultures, castes, religions, regions, and in every occasion, she was victorious. She gave utmost importance to listening to the poor, the marginalized, the exploited, the Dalits, women. Immediately after resigning from IAS services, she reached the Barefoot College in Rajasthan to be taught by the illiterate Dalit women. And she recalled Buli and Kesa as her first teachers in her incarnation at the secluded Dalit villages. Her word proclaimed people's movement and Magala Melas on people what they expressed and experienced. They all acclaimed the new avatar for them. Her identification with the poorest of the poor and their empowerment send red signals to the oppressors, who in turn rechristened her as an urban Naxal. She was encountered officials who worked for the people to defend constitutional guarantees and others who worked for power and profit. She left civil service with a status quo failure to deal with good, honest people fighting daily battles and its injustices. She chose people in the place of paperwork.
Brother
Unequal
Jose,
remuneration, unequal ill treatment, right to information.
Brother Jose, for some reason, the voice has stopped. Your connectivity is good. Have we lost Brother Jose?
He was,
I think we've lost. Okay, brother's back.
Speaking on mute.
Brother Jose, can you unmute yourself and continue?
Jeevan, can you unmute Brother Jose?
Yeah, I'm sending the request to him, but I think he's unable to do that.
The brother's trying, I can see. He's trying to do something. He's trying to figure it out. Brother, if you can hear us, even just pressing the space bar is enough. Can you press the space bar? Currently, brother, you're muted, so we cannot hear you. You would need to unmute yourself. Okay, brother, what we will do is we'll give you a bit of time, and we will take the next speaker, and then we'll come back to you so that you can continue. So the next speaker, the next speaker we have is a young student, Yuval D'Souza. Yuval D'Souza is 14 years old and studies in class 9. He's a debater and an aspiring writer. He's a keen observer and critic of the socio-political going on in our country. And from the lens of a student, questions the power imbalances ever present in society around him. I now warmly invite you, Yuval, to share your thoughts with us.
Good evening. I'm Yuval. Thank you for having me here. I got this book for Christmas, for my birthday. I'm so sorry. I got this book for my birthday. I've been reading it ever since. I'll be sharing my personal take on it because it's a really powerful book. That's the only adjective I can use for it. A lot of people, including myself, have been waiting a long time for such a work to be written. I couldn't agree more with what P. Sainath wrote. I was about to quote the review myself before Nikhil did. And I'll go further and say that by writing it through such a comprehensible lens, it opens up a lot of windows to a lot of people. Um, I first met Aruna when I must have been 7. My mother was on a fellowship at the MKSS following the Right to Information campaign, while simultaneously trying to educate me and my brother on it by having us file our own complaint to the municipality about some swings going missing in the local park. Since then, I've been to the MKSS twice. As a result of this, the sphere of activism has had a big impact on me. Coming from a background of privilege, being spared exposure to ground level extremities, the line in the book that most spoke to me naturally was right in the beginning, when Aruna describes her motivation for living among people. I quote, the worry and guilt about inequality and privilege. It perfectly frames what I, as I'm sure many of my contemporaries as well, now feel about activism and social justice. So I just turned 14 3 days ago. So evidently I've not been around for too long. But in the short span of my life, I can genuinely say that Samaj has never appeared more divided than it does today. From a polarized civics classroom to my selectively rescripted history textbook, like Aruna said, the multiple group chats of WhatsApp University, on the streets and in our homes, it's plain to see how every last one of us are inadvertently being conditioned to perceive the world in shades of black and white. At this point, you can't even blame it on the media. Really, by doing nothing, we are all culprits. Yet, even with such a sweeping campaign of pigeonholing, Bharat has still managed to uphold what Aruna has called fragmenting walls, which silently govern daily life across the spectrum as they have for centuries. If you're not able to follow my point, I don't blame you. Aruna has explained it brilliantly in the portion which says, thinking about the intersectionalities of identities challenges the basic binaries. Many women have a tendency to think laterally. A woman is a person with many identities, a Dalit, from a minority, poor. How much of her oppression comes from where? Unquote. In recent headlines, the brutal rape murder of medical personnel in Kolkata has deeply rattled the national conscience. In response, waves of people from very diverse ideological backgrounds, led mainly by the youth, have flocked to the streets in protest. Leaving aside the gross politicization of the issue, along with the fact that no one seems to care as much in similar cases when the victim belongs to either a Dalit or tribal community, I'll draw your attention to an incident that took place in Mumbai just a few days ago in relation to these protests. A group of Bahujan women and students from Jai Bhim Nagar attended a public protest which demanded the protection of women in public spaces. However, these select protesters were soon asked to leave by the residents of Hiranandani apartment complex because apparently their issues were different. Let me remind you, these are the same people who claim untouchability has been eradicated from modern India. Working class women demanding safety in their workplaces are no longer welcome at a demonstration against sexual violence. The sheer irony of such solidarity closely relates to what the author has described as the rigidity of categorization existing only to facilitate at the cost of reason, unquote. The collective struggle is a farce. So, moving on, probably my favorite part in this book was in chapter 5. The subheading of dispensable people versus exploited people was the one which felt the most relevant to me. I'll ask you this one thing. In the 21st century, with our increasingly liberal society of modern India, where has the divide grown from? Why is Gen Z just as fragmented, if not more so, than the conservative millennials? I study under the NCRT board, and by going to school, studying the textbooks, and scoring in the exam, I think I found the answer. I got full marks in economics this term. In the test, I wrote down exactly what was given in the book concerning the virtuous versus the vicious cycle. Ninth class students across the country today are being made to mug that, quote, when parents from disadvantaged backgrounds, themselves lacking in education and hygiene, keep their children in similarly disadvantaged states by A, not investing in education, and B, not investing in healthcare, it constitutes the vicious cycle. The key word here is choose. Is poverty a choice? We are repeatedly being told that beggars are lazy, that the poor choose not to work, and that families in slums see their many children as assets rather than as people. So if you want to know where the us versus them is coming from, look no further. When a Dalit aspires to educate their children, a lynch mob shows up at his doorstep. How can you blame a community for remaining oppressed when every single institution wants to keep them in their place? When land as a resource has forever been monopolized by the Brahmin Banya class, tell me, how can the disadvantaged invest in physical capital? I realize that the content has to be simplified for students, but please don't do us such a great injustice. Um, in a few words, Aruna has expressed the deeply flawed rhetoric of the upper middle class, perceiving the poor as a national burden and as a strain on the economy. It's a subtle indoctrination that has unfortunately seeped into the minds of liberals and conservatives alike. I'll conclude now because I don't want to bore you. A few weeks ago, I heard the Meghalaya Lok Sabha MP Ricky Andrews deliver a powerful sermon to a collection of northeastern churches across Delhi. He contrasted the roles of a believer versus that of a disciple of Christ. Aruna Roy has defined an activist's work as frank articulation that forces the fence sitters to answer uncomfortable questions. The challenge is to keep hoping. As followers in Jesus, as disciples of the Lord, I think it's high time that Christians nationwide come together to carry out God's work. If you look out of the window, there's plenty that needs changing, but it can only happen if we as believers are proactive. Manipur has been burning for 15 months now, and it's clear now that the Netajis aren't planning on resolving anything. When injustice occurs, we must speak out, regardless of the consequences. So much for considering it pure joy when we face trials of any kind. That's obsolete if we remain confined to our homes, workplaces, and churches. Being Christian is all about leaving behind the comfort zones of the world and taking on the depravity that lies stagnant around us. So, yes, this book is a landmark. As more people read this, many more eyes will open to face the reality we have been so keen to avoid. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuval. Very beautiful, youthful, energetic, passionate, idealistic. Those are words that are coming to me. And beautiful energy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Jonal. Thank you.
Yes, deeply inspiring. And it's always wonderful to hear a young voice. It's always wonderful to hear a young voice. So that was beautiful. Thank you, Yuval, for doing that for us. The final panelist, Aruna ma'am, I think you want to say something. Ma'am, please go ahead.
I just wanted to tell you all how very happy I am that he's grown up to be such a wonderful boy, since I knew him from when he was very, very young, and this is the first time I've really heard him. And you're better than I am. I think you should be writing a book soon.
Excellent, Yuval. You really even touched my heart.
Thank you, Yuval. I think, I echo that. Yes. So the final panelist we have is Vinod Jose. And Vinod Jose is a senior journalist and internationally acclaimed editor and investigative journalist with a 25-year career in Indian English newspapers and magazines. Notably, his investigative work on judicial compromises under the current regime provided crucial material that led opposition parties to initiate the first ever impeachment process against the CJI. Dr. Jose has received several awards for excellence in journalism, and his fearless watchdog journalism has made him a target, obviously, of numerous attacks throughout his career. It's with deep appreciation that I now invite Sir Vinod Jose to share his insights and thoughts.
Thank you, Brother Sunil. Hi, Aruna, Nikhil, and others. I'm seeing many of you after a long time. Yes, I think let me start with my knowing Aruna as a journalist. I moved to Delhi nearly 25 years ago as a crime reporter with the Indian Express, covering city crime, jails and courts, sort of a city beat reporter, so to speak. And there I was I happened to be there near the parliament when the parliament attack happened. And, as a journalist, I knew there was something sort of not adding up, but as reporters, we didn't know what to do because we are on a grind of chasing daily stories and endless daily beat reporting. I realized that maybe the people that the Delhi police had picked up Many of them were innocent, and their stories were not adding up. And when you turned around and looked at what the civil society and human rights people in Delhi were doing at that point, there was sort of a big silence for several months. And of course, it's not the job of a journalist, and as I think Aruna earlier said, an activist is somebody who is active and who is acting on something. But for a journalist, what one has been taught in journalism school is not to be an activist. But I was sad and affected to see Asia's largest jail, Tihar, and the kind of human rights violations. And one person I met at that point was Rona Wilson, who is in jail now in the Bhima Koregaon case. And a bunch of them were putting together a defense committee. The first instance that I was hearing about Aruna Roy's sort of interest outside of what was known to the public at that point, that she was an activist in Rajasthan, helping organize women and the workers. And as what she said, how the era shaped her, the Gandhi's time and the sort of most immediately the sort of the initial decades after India's independence. I don't think there were any borders. If you saw injustice, you saw injustice, and you fought for all kinds of injustices. Maybe there was an area of specialization. There was probably a day job which would keep you busy in a particular area, but you had an opinion on other things, and you sort of took the risk, as they call it, to come and defend a Kashmiri quote unquote terrorist. And that I think was when I was silently sort of admiring her work, that here is somebody who traveled all the journey that she did for what she believed in, coming to Delhi at a time where there was POTA, Prevention of Terrorism Act. It was quite intimidating, I think, at that point when we had 9/11 just a few months ago. There was a war build-up, and there were a few of these people who were writers, activists, and others, academics, 12 of them, I think, who came together to defend Professor S.A. Gilani. And from there on, I sort of watched her work closely, not just as a journalist, but also sort of that there is a textbook there in her life, that she always had not in the lived experiences converted into legislations in her bags, the RTI Act she was carrying along, what became, or the Narega, all that sort of, that's the work of many years of what they were doing in the laboratory of Rajasthan and elsewhere, finally finding a political acceptance in the election that was coming up in 2004. And then the UPA and the Congress Party, I think, was interested in sort of borrowing their narrative and their hard work and what their lived experience in the social sector was. And I think they had a short but very important window in the initial years. If you look at recent Indian history, any laws which have really affected people at the grassroots level, if you ask a commoner, a school teacher, somebody in a village to recall which are these laws, of course, you live, the draconian ones everyone would know probably, or even the criminal procedure courts and others. But, the chances that they would probably only recall the laws which Aruna Roy and Nikhil and, the group of people and the ecosystem around them created. They will recall RTI, the Right to Information Act. They will recall the Narega. They will recall the food security. They will, the Forest Act. The ecosystem sort of had a short window, I will say, as a political journalist who observed 2004 or 5, but very quickly also sort of came down heavily on the original promise of all these laws. Maybe that's a story that needs to also be said in some detail, how even when there was a certain kind of political acceptance, that, Sonia Gandhi pushed it, but then you could also see the reversal from Manmohan Singh and the cabinet committees, many cabinet committees, all of them spoke the same language, from Pranab Mukherjee to Chidambaram to Manmohan to everyone. And I remember one of the first amendments was sort of excusing CBI from RTI, and then there were all these issues on the minimum wage raising, and back and forth multiple times. So the reason why I'm kind of framing it like this is that when we look all that in the context of the last 10 years that we see in India, there was already a model that Aruna gave her life for, that in a democratic country, that it is not just that you can do a small activist model in a village, but that can be converted into policies and policy supported as a sort of a legislative framework. And then if you don't do it well the way that it has to be done, then you are actually giving the ground for far extremist, forces who will sort of bring democracy down with it. So the backsliding of democracy, I would say, is also because there was that very important window that we had between two fascist regimes of Vajpayee's and Modi's. And that time, the 10 years, while it was still sort of good in many sense, the Pota got repealed and many other things, but then UAPA came and, other many legislations too. And look at, again, another important person in the context of speaking truth to power, Arundhati Roy's this new sedition case. It's not a new sedition case, it's an old sedition case. It was framed and, she was booked in the UPA time. And of course it has reached a different level. I have 10 sedition cases in different parts of India. Of course, Modi did not, come up with these laws. These were there, and there were all kinds of requests, as journalists from our end, to get rid of this British era laws when it comes to freedom of speech and expression. So that window where Aruna could play a role in framing policies, which I would say might also be the only time outside of a undersecretary or a joint secretary or a secretary of a department sitting in Delhi and framing a law. That's the history that we have. That's a legacy that we have for a long time. But to have this draft and push it in, that came from the lived experience, and she gave time and she took pains for that. And in the audience that we have here, I think there is the mission which I think is driven, which is driving sort of your life too as the religious, is what Jesus said, that you fight for truth and justice. That's the life mission. If you have to contain Jesus's life message to one, is that there is no love more better than the love to die for your friend. There is.
Excuse me, sir. If you can summarize and come to a conclusion, please.
Yeah, I will take less than a minute. So there is the textbook case where I think Aruna's thesis should be seen and read, I hope, in future by anyone, not just as sort of an activist, but others too, as that one episode in Indian history where, if you look at American history, you have Reverend, James Lawrence and many others sort of who worked through the civil rights legislative history. And it was supposed to come from the human rights community, it was supposed to come from the civil rights community. But in this case, the right for food, right for information, right for all that came through as a sort of an extension of labor rights movement and feminism. And this is not a feminist project, so to speak, that Delhi and many others would understand in the language that we know. So she can be read and seen as a textbook who definitely need more than 7 minutes to sort of dissect or even give an introduction to. So I continue to be, even after a quarter century, after 25 years of knowing her work, continue to be a big fan of her.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it's true that 7 minutes is we can't do really justice, but you gave a very clear articulation and a very accurate dissection of her life through the book, and you yourself embody, as Ma'am Aruna, Sir Nikhil, and many of us present over here, we embody, and you definitely, sir, embody, how do we speak truth to power, and how do we speak truth, and we continue to do that, to injustice. We move to a time where we can open it up to the whole group. And the first thing I'm going to have a look at is some of the questions which are raised. So this is the time you can go into the chat box and you can ask any questions you have directed to a panelist. There may be 2 or 3 questions that I have noticed there. So I will take those first. So this question is to Ma'am Aruna, asked by, I think, by Sister Enigo. And she said, is there any text in the Bible? And you spoke, ma'am, about the Bible. Personally, it moved me when you said that Christ is the embodiment of compassion. Many holy people up on pulpits, when they say this, their words seem hollow. But when you said there was some realism about when you said that. So, can you share also this on this question, Ma'am Aruna? Is there any text in the Bible that moved you to become an activist? The space bar, if you press the space bar, I think it'll do the trick.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I just can't immediately recall any of the actual text of the Bible, but the overall impact of the stories, I would say, of the apostles, of the stories of Christ, the story of Christ with Mary Magdalene, the story of Christ of saying to people that if you haven't done anything, you can lift a stone and fling it on her. The story of Christ when he treated the lepers, the innumerable number of stories about Christ that showed his extraordinary compassion. And I think if I had to put one label on Christianity, I would call it the Christianity is the religion of compassion. That level, it really moved me. I'm unfortunately not able to recall. Must ask your forgiveness. But since I haven't read the text for many years now, but I recall the feelings I had when I read the text and when they were quoted to me at various points of time. And the dominant feeling is one of extraordinary compassion. And I carry that feeling with me today because if you do not have that kind of compassion with an obligation to act that Christ had, when you meet and see poverty, hunger, tragedy, when you see, it gives you a certain power to confront. When Jesus confronted the moneylenders, when he confronted ignorance, he must have had enormous strength, but it was born out of a gentleness, born out of compassion. And I think today's India needs that kind of strength to be born not out of violence, but out of compassion. And that's why Jesus Christ and Gandhi become important symbols for modern India, because we need both compassion and the spirit to fight violence, but without being violent yourself. And it requires a lot of courage, a lot of internal strength, and it requires tremendous determination to carry on. And I think Nikhil and Shankar and I and the MKSS have drawn this inspiration from a collective of people who believe in a kind of morality and ethics which recalls Christ. Yes, to me in many ways.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Beautiful. We move on to a question which is directed to Brunel. It may be interesting because we were talking about Christ, we were talking about Gandhi, who are actually models of authentic masculinity, which our country particularly needs today. And both of them were, at least Christ, I would clearly know was anti-patriarchal in his thinking. And so a question that comes to you, Brunel, is this: the personal is political. Yes. What has this to say? And I think Sister Libania has asked this. What has this to say and convey to us women in our country today? How do we grapple with this as what has happened in Kolkata? So, Brunel, can you comment on this, please?
Yeah, so
The
I,
connection
you
between
know,
the
can you
sun.
hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can hear me.
Yes, yes, Brunel, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, this phrase, the personal is political, or the slogan, reminds us that individual experiences of women, whether in the home or in the public, are deeply connected to broader societal structures. Now, what happened in Calcutta isn't just an isolated incident. It basically reflects systemic issues of gender-based violence and inequality. And I often feel that we need to look at the personal. I mean, we need to remember that the personal is political, and remember this in our everyday actions. Often we wait for some very dramatic or horrific event to look at the issue of gender justice, to look at issues of violence against women. But how we really have to come back to the family. How are we looking at gender justice within the family, within the community, within the neighborhood, and even the church? And I feel, particularly as a Christian woman, I speak now, I don't think that we are doing adequately to address the issue of gender justice within the church. And I think that, and whenever events like this happen, of course, we need to address and we need to bring about policy change and safety procedures. But how are we addressing gender justice in our everyday lives, in our religious communities, in our relationships and interactions between, say, men and women within the church, priests, brothers, and Catholic sisters? And in our schools, how are we addressing? And sometimes we produce those same patriarchal arguments and the same patriarchal structures that actually we seek to challenge. And I feel that if we are true, genuine disciples of Jesus, we will realize that the personal is political. We have to deeply deconstruct and respond to and act and resist gender injustice in our families, in our churches, in our religious communities, and in our parishes, and also as much as we work in the external world on issues of gender justice.
Thanks, ma'am. Thanks.
And please stop calling me
I
ma'am.
think.
I don't like to be called ma'am.
Sorry. Yes. Thanks, Brunel. I'll call Aruna because she
Yes,
basically
yes,
thinks
yes.
about
Please.
Yeah.
I
So Aruna, yes, please.
I just wanted to comment after Brunel that actually, what we have failed to do as a society is address masculinity. We've addressed feminism, yes, but you've not addressed the weakness of masculinity. You've not been able to address the vulnerable in men. Men, I think the most violent of men are the most vulnerable. They've never had a space to express their vulnerability and to unpack their masculinity, because so much of it is conditioning. So I think perhaps we have to do that as well, to add to what Brunel said.
Thank you. Yes. I would strongly endorse that a lot of work has to be done, especially on the narrative of when boys are growing, for them to be allowed to cry, for them to be allowed to feel, for them to be allowed to empathize, because otherwise we are creating monsters in the future who have no empathy, who have no connection with what they are doing. So thank you very much. I know that there are a few other questions popping. I'm also having a look at the time. And we have also Sister Dorothy, who's happy to give us some closing remarks. And I'd like to introduce Sister Dorothy to all of us. And Sister Dorothy Fernandez is a presentation sister and a former educationalist. She transitioned to working with marginalized women in Bihar in 1999. She focused on social justice and women's empowerment, impacting 25 villages in Maner block. Since 2003, she has been advocating for the urban poor in Patna, particularly on issues of shelter, livelihood, and food rights. Sister Dorothy is the national convener for Forum of Religious for Justice and Peace, convener for NAPM Bihar, and serves on the Supreme Court's Committee for Urban Homeless Shelters in Bihar. I now kindly invite Sister Dorothy Fernandez to grace us with her closing remarks and insights.
Thank you, Brother Sunil, for this invitation. At the very outset, I would like to thank Aruna Roy, a woman who has been the focus of our conversation this evening. She has shown us what it means to move and to act. From her book, she has called us and is inviting us to leave the comfort zones and to go to the periphery. And we can only do this if we are directly engaged with people and their issues at the grassroots. As Aruna herself has said, we need to have conversations and dialogue. And in today's world, we are lacking in that. As religious women and as religious brothers and men and women, I feel this book, I can resonate with her because Aruna also left a very, very promising job in the administration, went down to the grassroots and learned from the people and then did her activism. For many of us who have also taken this path of leaving the comfort zones, confining to the institutions, we feel that at times we also were called anti-congregational, anti-religious, like some of us are mentioned as liberals, urban actuals, Atmankwadis, anti-nationals. So this is perhaps the tag we take if we want to be constantly engaged in issues of the people. So the personal is political, unless and until it is a personal conviction, a personal choice, it will never lead to a political action. Because the issues that we are grappling with the people are basically political. So one has to make that shift in our thinking, in our paradigm, and say that, okay, we have to speak to power. So I feel this book, Yuval's input onto that, as a young person, what is the coming generations looking for, is an open invitation to many of us who are present at this webinar here, this book promotion. And I think it must be a read for all of us religious, all of us activists. I'm happy to say that for me, Aruna stands as a role model today because she has moved into paths which is inviting us to follow Jesus of Nazareth, who walked this world as a human being and also walked the unbeaten path. During his time, he was termed as a rebel and a revolutionary. And perhaps maybe some of these labels is what we as religious need to take and carry on. It has been a privilege to have Aruna to talk to us, and her life will constantly be an inspiration as she continues to engage with people, and hoping that we religious also will follow that path. So all the best to all of us who have been there. And as women, a woman who has headed many Indian women movements, she continues to inspire thousands of women, not only in India, but across the globe. So Aruna, it is a great contribution you're giving to our society. And as you said very beginning, all this springs in our upbringing at home. What we learn from there, and it only gets sharpened as we grow on into years. So may this be the inspiration for many young people, as Yuval also has put it across. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Dorothy, with deep appreciation. We thank Sister Dorothy for your accurate observations and very clear synthesis. I now call Steve Rocha to give the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking from Perth, where I'm actually engaged with young people like you who are questioning the status quo in many ways and asking the difficult questions. And I was glad that you all represented that voice today. Uh, and we begin each day with a hymn, and today's hymn was Voices That Challenge. Both the voices of the most vulnerable, marginalized voices in our crying earth, but also the voices that challenge that status quo, as we had today, in the form of reflecting on this lovely book of Aruna Roy. I'm also reminded of that prayer that says, Jesus, comfort us in our affliction, but afflict us in our comfort. And I think our speakers today have done a great job on disturbing us and reclaiming that dangerous memory of Jesus. I think that you were referred to in his sharing as well. So the reason why we chose these four speakers was that it gave us a sense of different expressions of um, no doubt Aruna and Nikhil's lives are are such spectacular forms of the Jesus voice in our world today. So thank you, Aruna and Nikhil, for upholding us to what we as Christians are called to do. And even though you don't remember any Christian texts, your life to us is a message, and thank you for that, Aruna and Nikhil. Um, but we have Brother Jose who reflects the whole idea of bringing in the Dalit voices, particularly those of Christians, and struggling there along with our Dalit Christians. Thanks to Brynel, who represents the professional voices and bringing young people into the entire uh, vision of Christ that makes it more inclusive and compassionate. Thanks, Yuval, for bringing in the struggling voice of young people who are struggling to see Christianity now in a new form of realism and lived out rather than just spoken from the pulpit. And thanks to Vinod, who in your through your writings and your journalism have been the blaring voice of Christ and his Sermon on the Mount. So thank you for all of these lovely voices we've heard today. And we've chosen today as the day to have this particular meeting because it's on the eve of the death of John the Baptist, who was a prophet in his time, as well as it's also the death of Edmund Rice. The E of our Pratik is actually in honor of Edmund, our patron. Brother Sunil Brito is one of the Christian brothers who follows that particular path, and we as Pratik have adopted that particular vision, and was glad to have Sister Dorothy with us, whose presentation convent was the inspiration for Edmund Rice. So I'm going to end with a simple prayer, even while I keep thanking Aruna, Nikhil, Brunel, uh, and Brother Jose, Yuval. I also want to thank Cheryl D'Souza and Prashant, her boss, for keeping disturbing us and holding on to the truth of what India should be. Thanks, Vinod, Dorothy, Sunil, for anchoring it so well. Thanks to Jeevan, who was doing the technical work in the background. Thanks to Sister Connie and Sister Libana, who really spent hours and days preparing this and organizing this. Thank you so much for all the organization that went behind it. But a special thanks to our interns, Harsh, Nivya, Jennifer, Rohit, and Aditi, for all the background work you've done. But may I just end with a word of thanks to the big spirit who's brought us together, as I end with a prayer that says, "Oh God, we thank you for the gift of Edmund Rice, whose feast day we celebrate tomorrow. We may also remember people who live the Edmund Rice vision in our world today. He opened his heart to Christ present in those oppressed by poverty and injustice. And the voices we heard today reopen that call. May we follow his example of faith and generosity as we seek to live lives of love and service and justice and inclusion, equity and sustainability. We make this prayer to the varied names of the mystery we call God. And even if we don't honor a big spirit, Let's honor the vision that Ambedkar and Gandhi and the big visionaries of our world gave us of a world that's equitable and just. We make this prayer through the multiple names of God. Amen. Thanks, Sunil, and thank you, everyone. But thanks to all the participants, provincials, superior generals who are present today, and others who really have expressed your commitment to reclaim that disturbing voice of Jesus and to live it in the context of our world today. Sunil.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, brothers. No, I keep on calling you brother Steve. Steve was with us and is with us. And thank you, Steve, for that. And thank you for organizing this. Steve is the one who has organized all of this. And it's a great, great initiative. And he embodies himself, compassion, and justice that we need in our world. So we've come to a time where we can say our goodbyes and our thank yous. So you can maybe, if there is nothing else, yeah.
Sunil, sorry. I'm
Yeah,
going to ask
go
to
ahead.
share the book. We've gathered together to talk about a book, but we haven't shared the link where you may want to buy the book for.
Sure.
So Jim will get that link for us. Please feel free to share with others. Aruna, we may invite you to one more session for social justice activists that we are in touch with through the Vadana Toda Abhiyan. We hope you'll make yourself available to that. And we're suggesting the 9th of September, which is the Nine is Mine Day, our Children's Campaigns Day. So we'd like you to be there. That's the way we would like to celebrate our day, or maybe the 9th of October, which is the Pratyek Day. So one of those 2 days, we'll see if you're available. So make this message available to people across the board because it's so vital and so important. Thanks, Nikhil, also for helping us with getting Aruna on board. Thanks, Aruna.
Thank you all very, very much. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to Yuval. Thanks to Jose. Thanks to everybody. You've all been so wonderful, and every one of you has contributed to it. It's not me. That book made me very nervous because I thought it would project me, as it unfortunately has. It is the MKSS. It's a collection of people. It's a collection of marvelous human beings, including those who are under such physical and other kinds of stress who contributed to it. So it's a collective and not me alone. So thank you very much. Thank you from all of us in the MKSS. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Just your gesture of inviting Nikhil before you showed very strongly that you believe in a collective work. So thank you very much. It's all of that is great, a great example for us. So you really lived that. We could see it even now. So thank you very much, and thank you to all our participants. And before we leave, maybe I don't know. Okay, we cannot unmute ourselves as we do the usual setting. Okay, so it's time for us to say goodbye. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye too. Yeah.
Sunil, since you asked for that brief text, can you share your email ID?
Yeah, sure. sunilbrito@gmail.com.
Can you just put it on the chat box so I can?
Yes. Thank you, Brunel, for remembering that. Yeah, thank you.
Are you waiting for me to leave? So I will. How do I?
Yeah, I suppose we can leave.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you so much once again.
Yes, thanks to everybody. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Libanya. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Jeevan.
Thanks, everybody. And if I've missed out any names, I ask forgiveness. All of you have been wonderful. And of course, it's a thank you from me, Nikhil, Shankar, and all the others who have constituted even the book. The book is just written by me, but it's the spirit of all of us. Thank you.
Aruna, I'll get in touch with you for an online interaction with our students at TIS.
Definitely, my dear. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
thanks, Aruna. Thanks, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brunel. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Sunil.
Yeah, thanks, Libanya. Thanks, Dorothy, Jeevan, and yeah,
It
great.
was quite a challenge to encapsulate everything in a short, 7 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It was.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
that is.
I suppose we did well with regard to the time. We started a bit late, but I
You
think
did well. Very nice. Very nice. Thank you so much, Brunel.
kept moving, and I
Gaurav?
think it was, yeah, there was a very, very good pace to it, and it wasn't dragging or, yeah, so that was very good. Thanks, Brunel. Yes,
Was
thanks.
brother able to complete his reflection?
Yeah, we lost brother, and then we couldn't get him back.
But I thought his thing was kind of, and then we moved to Yuval, naturally.
Yeah,
Yuval was brilliant.
Yeah, Yuval was brilliant. He was brilliant.
He was really good. He was really good.
Pure idealism and passion. Wow, it's fantastic.
No, and
That's
14 to show
an
14 to show that kind of nuance, no?
yes,
It's
yes.
marvelous.
That's the outcome we need. The education system has to work towards that as outcomes. If we can produce a critical mass of that, yeah.
I think it's important. It's important also to continue the engaging in these conversations, because often what happens, we finish with this, and the conversation, especially with Yuval as a young person, how does he perceive and see things? So maybe sometime this has to take forward as well. It'll just get lost in this whole sea of activism.
Very true. Libanya, which school is he in?
Sarvodaya Patel something.
Okay. That's good, but I suppose his parents are a big force. A lot of things are happening in some of our schools, many of our schools. I can see just now even on WhatsApp. So my sense is that we are seeing this. We are seeing a lot of youth. We're seeing a new consciousness emerging. It's really hope. It's real hope just to hear that voice.
The young people who come to institutions like ours, we know they are making a choice and they're coming, so we know that they, basically have a certain, value framework. To what extent they take it, one doesn't know, that can always be, that's a debatable thing. But young people like him, okay, and to have that kind of, conviction and understanding of issues, and very well read and articulated and reflective. It was it was very authentic, his sharing.
Yeah.
It was. No, that was really heartwarming, actually. Hopeful, you could say also. Great. Okay. So
thank you then.
Some of our participants are still here. So
thank you so much. I have to go for a meeting.
Thank you to all of them. Thank you to all of them. Thank you for they can hear us. We cannot hear them. Unfortunately, that's how the workshop setup is. Correct?
That is true. I too was feeling bad.
Yeah,
there are so many of them who wanted to talk.
On the other side of the Iron Curtain.
Yeah.
We cannot see them.